Can we see that? Okay, Moira. Yes. Okay, super. So my plan this morning is to give you just a bit of an overview of the structure of the January Start Education Studies MSc. My name is Layla Adamson. This will be my third year leading this course, so I've managed to get a bit of experience. We've made some changes responding to the needs of the different students. And you will see if you have seen that there's two intakes. There's a September start course and there's a January start course. In many ways, they're very similar, and the qualification that you get in the end is the same, but there are a few differences along the way. So I'll point those out as we come across them.
Okay.
So if you have any sort of questions, I'm in charge of everything to do with the kind of teaching and the academic side of the course. If it's admin related queries once you get started, the HAS Courses Edu is our admin team. But as Moira said, her team are in charge of all the things before you would start the course, all the application and registration questions. So there's a few different email addresses, but if it comes to the wrong one, we will redirect to the right person. So a bit of context for the Strathclyde Institute of Education. So the University of Strathclyde, this came from my previous course leader who was very interested in the structure of UK universities, but it's sometimes not as well known around the world because it doesn't sit within that kind of Russell group of the oldest universities in the UK. But I'm sure if you've been engaging with the website and with the other things from the university, you'll see that Strathclyde is doing really well in league tables and it's really making a name for itself, particularly for applied subjects. And education is one of those applied subjects. And the Institute of Education has, it started as a separate teacher training college in Glasgow, but it was brought within the University of Strathclyde and is really one of the leading centres of teacher education. But we also do lots of the work around education, so the study of education as a discipline as well. And if you want to find out a bit more about the different sort of areas of expertise that our staff have. If you search our website, there is a podcast for the Institute of Education with lots of our staff kind of talking about what they do and the interests that they have. So that's a great resource. There we go. So in an MSc in Education Studies, it asks you to think about what is education, not just as teaching what do we do, but also what is it as an idea? Where does it come from? I mean, it teaches you sort of the lots of the different questions that different disciplines linked to education would ask, and some of the answers that have come up in different places at different points in time. So our course tries to cover and include a wide number of disciplines. That includes philosophy of education, psychology of education, history, sociology, a bit of politics in there. And there's a fair amount, particularly in the January start course, of international comparative education, partly because that's the background that I come from as a researcher. We also look at a range of different research methodologies used in the broad field of education and the sorts of methods that people use to answer the questions that they have. As part of an MSc in Education Studies, you will also undertake a dissertation, which is an independent research project. You get some support. You are guided by a supervisor, but each supervisor is only given about 12 hours to work with that student and read their work and meet with them. So it really is an independent project. So the idea is that you come out of the MSc skilled up as a researcher with that knowledge and understanding. Dum, dum. So this list here, I'm not going to go through it all, but this is a kind of list of the different areas and themes where people have undertaken dissertation research before. So you'll see that it's really broad. So there's things from philosophy and history of education. This year, I've got someone looking at religious education and religious minorities in Kuwait, for example. And then all the way through a number of different things. We've got things to do with language, all different stages of learning, and then people interests in like physical education, digital education, health and well-being. We have people who can supervise across a really wide range of topics. So there is a lot of scope, particularly for the dissertation, for you to shape it in the way that you are interested. So thinking about the general course structure, we have 4 core modules, and I'll tell you in a minute what those are. Then there are 2 additional or elective modules where you have an element of choice in what you choose to study, plus the dissertation, which is the equivalent of 3 other modules. So it's worth quite a lot of that final grade. It's a big project. We do mostly in-person teaching with a range of staff, although there are some modules which are in hybrid format where you do some of the classes online in the evenings. And that is to allow you to be in classes with our sort of home Scottish students who are generally working part-time on their studies whilst also doing a role of different jobs during the day, many of them teachers. And so it's been a thing in the past couple of years trying to really bring the cohorts together so that we get a chance to learn from each other. So there are some modules which teach partly in the evenings online and then include Saturdays. But again, it wouldn't be a requirement that you have to fit to that. There's lots of different choices in how you can put your timetable together with those elective modules. But the core modules are all taught during the day, during the working week, between 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. There's also a virtual learning environment that the one we use is called My Place, and that has online resources. It gives you access to the readings, the preparation and consolidation tasks that you're asked to do. Lots of modules also use that as a way to communicate with your classmates, to be thinking through ideas between the taught lessons. And then there's a range of assignments. So we do a fair amount of formative work, so asking you to read and prepare in advance for seminars and classes. And then you have the opportunity to get feedback and sort of discussion about the ideas as you go along. And then the summative assignments are a mix of written work. So it might be essays, reports, your dissertation is a piece of written assignment. But we also do presentations, some of them individual, some of them in a group. So the idea is that we're trying to support you to develop a range of communication skills that will be useful in the workplace, whichever direction you choose to go in. Next slide. So looking at the structure, the way it's going to work this year. So in the beginning, so semester 1 starts in January. There is one of the core modules here, Frameworks for Understanding Learning, which is a shared module with the class who arrived in September. So that was a good opportunity to kind of meet and learn about what it's like being a student at Strathclyde from the class that are a semester ahead. And then also the research methodology and reasoning class starts. So that's the one that teaches you about how we approach education research, and that starts in that first semester. There's also possibility for one of the optional or elective modules in semester 1, but this note here that we can only include an elective module in that first semester for students who arrive and register on time at the start of the course in January. We have found in the past that there can be a number of obstacles that mean that students arrive a bit later, but what we recommend then is that the elective modules are taken later. So it's worth bearing that in mind. If you have your heart set on an elective module that runs in the first semester, please do arrive on time at the beginning of the course in January. And then, so the second semester starts, some classes start in April, some classes start in the beginning of May. But we have 2 core modules there. We have Thinking About Education, which is a philosophy of education module, and asks you to engage in depth with one text about education and really learn to interrogate that text. And then we have the Globalization Society and Education Policy module, which I lead, which is a sort of real look, trying to look globally at the way that education agendas and policies are enacted in different places around the world. And we try to create opportunities for people to draw on their knowledge and experience of context that they are familiar with. And then you have an opportunity to select another elective module. And then you can see that there are sort of dissertation support sessions and sessions to support academic practice skills and helping people to understand the expectations for high quality academic work in the UK. They start right from the beginning and kind of run through until you move into your independent study phase for your dissertation in the second semester. So it's the beginning of that second semester or halfway through where we would aim to match you up with a supervisor to help guide that through as you develop your idea. So I won't go through all of this, but if you get the video and you want to go back and read in more detail, but you'll see that the core modules are, one is influenced by psychology of education. And if anyone has got a teacher education degree, has done a PGCE or PGDE, this will be quite familiar. This is often the module that people say, oh, okay, I know some of this, I've learned some of this before. But if that is not your background, please don't worry, because the entire course is set up that you don't have to be a qualified teacher to do this. In fact, we have a student this year who is coming from a pharmacy background, and she's doing her dissertation around pharmacy education. So we try and make it so people can come from a huge range of different backgrounds. Oops. The one I just missed was that's the philosophy of education one I mentioned, thinking about education, and then this globalization one, which brings a whole load of different things together, a bit of sociology, a bit of history, and a fair number of resources from international comparative education. Then there's our research methods and reasoning course, where you learn not just about how to do research, but how people think about research in different ways, how they think about knowledge in different ways, how they think about what reality is in different ways. And this is a really nice opportunity to explore the assumptions that you bring to the world and how that might fit in with the sorts of questions that you would want to ask in your dissertation project. So thinking about electives, so sometimes called option modules, the January start course, we have access to a wider range of options. So if you start in September, you're going down certain pathways. There's 3 pathways to choose from. If you start in January, it's a bit sort of free for you to choose where your elective modules come from. And we draw from a range of different postgraduate courses available across the Institute. So I've put some examples here of the range of modules. So there's modules from the TESOL course about language learning, and there's also digital education modules. There's modules from a course entitled Supporting Teacher Learning, so about how teachers learn, the context that they learn in. And there's health and well-being modules. Education and self-formation is a philosophy module. So there's a range of different things that you'd be able to choose from. I just have to put in the caveat that these are examples. It really depends on what staff are available and the number of students. So we have to have 8 students to run a module. So we offer it out across all the programs running at that time, and we do our best to try and make as many modules run as possible. But there are some sort of different things that we have to balance and bear in mind. You don't want to be in a class that's too small. It doesn't make the conversation is not quite as high quality if there's not enough people in it for a good debate. And then there was a question kind of before thinking about career options. We really do have people go into a huge variety of different careers. I think I'm going to start with that big yellow box. So one thing, and I think it will be in all the materials that you have seen so far, the Education Studies MSc is not a teaching qualification. So it doesn't qualify you to teach in Scotland or the UK or elsewhere. However, it can be a really useful kind of career development opportunity. So if you are already a qualified teacher and you want to boost your professional skills and understanding, this is a really good opportunity to do that. Or if you're in the planning side, the kind of civil service or policy side of education, again, this is a really good course for developing particularly critical thinking skills, engagement with research, engagement with evidence, thinking critically about the questions and the choices that are made within the space of education. So we've got people who come to us already with policy backgrounds or looking to move in that direction. NGOs in the charity sector, particularly if you are in the kind of global south space, there's a huge involvement of NGOs and charities in education in many of those countries. And we have people going into civil service roles. People who continue with research, a number, I'm writing lots of references at the moment for students who have finished their course, gone to do something else for a year or so, and now looking to come back into a PhD. It could also be consultancy. So lots of people will work in educational research consultancy without necessarily doing a PhD. A master's is sometimes enough for that. Lots of people working in higher education, professional support roles, research offices, international offices, people going into early years childcare. So in the UK, that is one level where you don't need your teaching qualification, and there's other qualifications that support that, but many of them can be learned on the job, or classroom support roles, also an option. And health and social care sectors. So we kind of imagine these as kind of related vocational sectors where lots of the skills will be transferable. So this really is a degree where we are aiming to teach not just knowledge about education, but transferable skills relating to critical thinking, asking questions, engaging with literature and different forms of evidence. So I think from my experience of working with a range of different cohorts now, I just don't want to end on this slide that if you are thinking, making your decision about whether you want to come to Glasgow or you've decided that and you're preparing to come, please do engage with all the information that you have access to, either that the team are emailing to you or on the website through the international student pages. They have a real wealth of information, and they have other people who you can chat to someone if you've got particular questions that are not covered. But please do pay attention to the guidance around the cost of living in Glasgow. Depending on where in the world you're coming from, it can be a bit of a shock. And because there are limits on how much you can work, with different visas, but also we would advise you try and limit how much extra paid work you need to do, because this is an intense 1 year course and there's quite a lot of work involved from a study perspective. And please do sort of bear that in mind. We have had students find the financial side of things quite stressful, and so you want to know what it is that you're taking on, I think. And then there's also information there for students with families. I know that with the visa changes, there's fewer people able to come with their families, but that is a slightly different thing to coming as a single person. So please do bear that in mind, that the university doesn't provide family accommodation, for example, and access to nurseries and things can be a bit complicated. And so it's good to know what you're doing. Glasgow is a great city. People are really friendly. They really do try to help. It's a very different sort of situation to landing in the centre of London, for example, where everyone's so busy, they have their heads down, they don't necessarily have time for other people. Glasgow is friendly, people are kind, but please do be organised and plan ahead. The way things tend to happen in the UK, the idea that you can show up and just sort it out is much less common. People book things in advance, things are organised. Often you have to book things online. So please do make sure you arrive with a plan for where you'll stay, at least for a while. And we will do everything that we can to help sort things out. But we have had people kind of arrive not knowing where they're going to stay, and we're trying to avoid that stress for our students, because we want you to come able to get started and learn as soon as you can. So my last slide then is any questions. So I will stop sharing.